Hi, everyone.
Hi again. We're in the finished mystery. 600 pages. Most of us associate the finished mystery, if we know anything at all about it, with the book of Revelation, which, yes, it does have about half the book is devoted to that. But 200 pages, no less, is devoted to Ezekiel. Why have they been fascinated by Ezekiel for the whole 100 years so that they're now churning out another book? They're ever shorter. They're never less detailed, by the way. But their new book that they're now studying, I understand, is on this subject too. Why do they find the book of Ezekiel so handy? Well, they find themselves in it, as usual. Whatever prophecies are in the Bible or about the Watchtower Bible Tract Society.
They can use it.
So we'll see that in the portion we're looking at today. But also, they find lots of weapons in it. There's a lot of graphic and detailed, even lurid descriptions in the book that they find absolutely appropriate for their denunciations of you-know-who. Christendom, and specifically the churches. So they find themselves in it, and they find denunciations they need to do their public preaching work. And that public preaching work, of course, got them in big trouble with this book. They still brag about that part of it, although they don't republish the book or quote it. They refer to its value, i.e. in stirring up the trouble that got them, some of them put in jail in 1918 to 19, and getting some of their workers persecuted. And they were persecuted. But why were they persecuted? Well, it had a lot to do with the contents of this book. So we wanted to look at the chapter 9, where they find their identity. The man with the writer's inkhorn. What did they have to say about that back in 1917? So we thought to read the whole short chapter, 11 verses, and give you some of the commentary direct from the finished mystery from 1917. So let's read verses 1 and 2 in the NIV.
Yes. Then I heard him call out in a loud voice, "Bring the guards of the city here, each with a weapon in his hand." And I saw 6 men coming from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. With them was a man clothed in linen, who had a writing kit at his side. They came in and stood beside the bronze altar.
All right, here's the commentary straight from the book. Chapter 9 depicts the slaughter of the idolaters of Jerusalem. It types the literal slaughter of the spiritual idolaters of Christendom in the time of trouble, and also their destruction as tares by the word of truth, which will manifest their true condition and cause them to cease the pretense of being Christians. We need to add the specific detail that this time of trouble they're referring to here, they believed had started in 1874. So they believed they were already in a time of extension of mercy. They thought everything would be wound up by 1914, but here they are in 1917. Russell is dead. So the time of trouble has an extension, which has now gone 3 years at the time of the publication. And then they say the picture corresponds to the harvesting of wheat and tares by the sickle of truth. They'd also believe that this harvesting period started in 1874. So again, there's an extension of the harvest, now 43 years long by 1917. What's next? Well, the burning of the tares. They had said that the nations of Christendom would collapse in total anarchy by 1914. It hasn't happened. But they're still predicting it. So when will it happen? Well, in a future video we'll get to the timing, because they're very explicit still about that. It will happen by 1918, and the anarchy will certainly happen by 1920. They go on. The 6 men that have the weapons here. The 6 with earthly weapons are the rulers of the 6 great nations: Russia, Germany, Austria, France, and England, and Italy. The 6 with the sword of the Spirit symbolize all the Elijah class. The 6 with one other making up the 7, the complete number. These have their commission from the north, from the seat of divine dominion, from God himself. So notice they're linking the participants of World War I with the 6 destroyers here, who have the weapons. Now, They go on to say, practically all Bible translators and commentators agree that the one with a writer's inkhorn by his side was not one of the six, but a seventh, garbed as a priest, or as a clerk or officer in an army of the East. The linen signifies the imputed righteousness of Christ. Now here's a part to note. The writer's inkhorn symbolizes that the seventh man's function was to write. God identified him thus. When the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was at Allegheny, Pennsylvania, an open Bible was to be painted on one of the large front windows of the office. A sign painter, not in the truth with a capital T, painted the open Bible, and without instruction from anyone on his own volition, he painted the Bible as open at Ezekiel chapter 9. The man in linen was the Laodicean servant, the Lord's faithful and wise steward, Pastor Russell. When Pastor Russell saw this, that is the painting on the window, he turned pale. Ezekiel, seeing the man in linen, types Pastor Russell thereafter, seeing himself to be the antitype of that man, one of the most prolific writers of the age, and the only one to write and publish widely the glad tidings of the actual second presence of Christ. So we have it that Pastor Russell saw himself in this unplanned sign in a window.
Yeah.
And the unique message of Pastor Russell was the actual second presence of Christ, which we know, if we've done our homework, was the 1874 invisible presence. Mm. So of course they've scrapped that truth that they say was unique to Pastor Russell's message. Let's read verses 3 and 4.
Now the glory of the God of Israel went up from above the cherubim where it had been, and moved to the threshold of the temple. Then the Lord called to the man clothed in linen, who had the writing kit at his side, and said to him, Go throughout the city of Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over all the detestable things that are done in it.
What's the application of that in 1917? They say the center of Christendom is the nations of the United States, Canada, Great Britain, France, Germany, Russia, and Scandinavia. So apparently that is the antitype of the midst of Christendom, according to this logic. Hither and thither, traveling and preaching for nearly 40 years, Pastor Russell obeyed this command, and through the printed page of books, tracts, and newspapers, he went into every corner of the world. Set a mark, literally set a tau, upon the foreheads. The tau was the 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and in its earlier form had the shape of a cross. The forehead signifies the intellect. Pastor Russell's great work was to impart indelibly in the minds of certain ones the truth about the cross, the sacrifice of the Christ, head and body, and the part of the church therein. It was the duty of the clerk or officer of an Oriental army to mark the people either for slaughter or to be left untouched. The mourners in Zion are those faithful ones in Christendom that appreciate that conditions are evil in churchianity, perhaps without understanding just how. All these are to be marked in their minds with the knowledge of the present truth. That phrase, of course, goes right back to Barber in Three Worlds, and before there was a Watchtower. Mm-hmm. And yet you know, as you look at this, that two more present truths have been dumped by the Watchtower since.
Yeah.
One,
yeah.
The cross is not a symbol of Christ anymore, as it was plainly here. It was the great work, it says here. Pastor Russell's great work, to imprint indelibly in the minds of certain ones the truth about the cross. So what's the truth about the cross? So something else here too.
Yeah. This comment that he makes about the
sacrifice.
The sacrifice being Christ, head and body.
The sacrifice of the Christ, head and body. And we've spoken about that, and we'll put a link in at the end, that they really did believe that until the body of Christ, that is the church, the 144,000, were in heaven in 1914, the sacrifice of Christ, the atonement, would not complete.
That really shocked me.
So we've got three things that are gone already. The idea of the second presence, the parousia from 1874, the cross, and now this idea of 144,000 plus one.
Plus him being the man with the inkhorn. Russell is identified as the man with the inkhorn. Well, they've scrapped that too.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
Let's read verses 5 to 11.
As I listened, he said to the others, "Follow him through the city and kill without showing pity or compassion. Slaughter old men, young men and maidens, women and children. But do not touch anyone who has the mark. Begin at my sanctuary." So they began with the elders who were in front of the temple. Then he said to them, "Defile the temple and fill the courts with the slain. Go." So they went out and began killing throughout the city. And while they were killing and I was left alone, I fell face down, crying out, "Ah, sovereign Lord, are you going to destroy the entire remnant of Israel in this outpouring of your wrath on Jerusalem?" He answered me, "The sin of the house of Israel and Judah is exceedingly great, and the land is full of bloodshed, and the city is full of injustice. They say, 'The Lord has forsaken the land. The Lord does not see.' So I will not look on them with pity, or spare them, but I will bring down on their own heads what they have done." Then the man in linen, with the writing kit at his side, brought back word, saying, "I have done as you commanded."
We'll see in a future video that they actually have fixed a time for this. This judgment will happen in 1918. But what you would miss as a witness is, of course, little phrases like "my sanctuary." Start with "my sanctuary." Start the killing, the judgment at my sanctuary. And you're reminded of the saying of Peter, who might be thinking of this very passage, when he says judgment starts at the house of God. Don't miss the fact, though, that this place where he's judging is his house.
Yeah.
So when you are a witness, you think of the judgments on Christendom, the antitype of all of this, as being final. God is finally judging them, and they're certainly not his.
Yeah.
Whereas in this setting, you can plainly see that when he calls the sanctuary his, he's also calling the priesthood his. He said the Levitical priesthood would be eternal, and the people of Israel will be beloved for the sake of their fathers, which Paul reiterates in the New Testament. And this city, where he had said through Solomon, to Solomon, this would be where his heart and his eyes would be forever.
Yeah.
So if he's judging them, it's because he wants to restore them.
So I would say with witnesses, though, when they look at these things and they hear about types, it's the type that takes over. They don't think about the original context or...
The antitype, you mean, this takes over.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're always trying to bring it down to, it's about us, it's about our time. They don't look at what it's actually about and who it's actually about. They apply it all to themselves.
Yeah.
And that's a danger. If that's the first thing you see in a text, is how you think it applies to you, instead of who's it talking about, and how does it apply to them?
Well, here you've got, again, underlining the fact that the truth, which they have now called in the last statement here about verse 11, "I have done as thou hast commanded me," the truth. Pastor Russell was faithful to his great task of publishing the capital T truth and imprinting the Tau of present truth in the minds of the Spirit begotten. He died in October 16 and went beyond the veil, and has undoubtedly reported in the presence of Christ that he has done the work he was given to do. Another truth that is now a past truth, i.e. that Pastor Russell and the others had already gone beyond the veil.
Yeah, they didn't believe that.
Well, they did believe that in 1914 they would all be beyond the veil, but they've changed that one too. Pastor Russell was was dead in the grave in 1916 and 1917. So the macabre idea that he is arranging this work and even this book from beyond the veil, I remember thinking how spooky that is when I first read it.
Yeah. And I this idea of going back to this idea of the body, Christ, the head, and the body of Christ being somehow a special message that he was presenting, is because it was a different message, that's for sure. It was a different message because he was teaching that it wasn't, that Christ's sacrifice was not enough. Not just Christ, it had to be Christ plus them.
And the importance of the date 1914.
Yeah, to complete the sacrifice.
When that would be complete, it had to be by 1914 because otherwise he couldn't proceed legally based on Gentile Times idea. He couldn't proceed with the work until they were all in heaven.
Yeah, but I remember reading Tabernacle Shadows. I think that's where it finally really dawned on me what he was teaching was that they needed more than just Jesus' death. They needed theirs as well. Oh, that's different than Christendom, all right.
We'll put a link into one of the videos we did. I think it's the second video in the series, Have Jehovah's Witnesses Ever Been God's Organization? It was on this very issue from the book The New Creation, one of his heaviest tomes, where he discusses this in great detail, the significance of the body of Christ, that is the 144,000 in the ransom sacrifice.
Yeah, it's in several of the books, but yeah.
So that'll be a link on your screen, and in the future video we'll discuss their expectations in respect to 1918.